Welcome to the Supplemental Election Judge Training for the Minnesota 2020 Presidential Nomination Primary Election. We thank you for serving your community and your country as an election judge. The following presentation provides the required 1 hour of additional training for the 2020 Presidential Nomination Primary Election. Election judges that receive training in 2018 or 19 do not require any further training beyond this presentation. If you are not trained ahead of those elections, you will need to complete additional requirements. Your city clerk will contact you to schedule that training. For simplicity, we will use the term presidential primary to describe this election throughout this presentation. During this training, we will cover the following topics. What is the presidential primary, and how is this election established? How will the presidential primary work? Voter privacy. Polling place changes for the presidential primary. Overview of election judge positions, where we will look at some of the key changes that will impact judge duties on Election Day. Accessibility, challengers and complaints, and what's next after the presidential primary. What is the presidential primary? The presidential primary was authorized by legislation passed in 2016. The law shifted the presidential nomination process from the caucus system to a presidential primary election. This places Minnesota among the 15 states and territories that hold their presidential primary on Super Tuesday. Minnesota's presidential primary provides the opportunity for Minnesota voters to help determine which presidential candidates appear on the ballot in November. Candidates will not be elected to office through this election, but the performance of the candidates in this election will help in deciding how delegates are awarded in each party's presidential nominating process. Each party sets their own rules for how primary results impact the awarding of delegates. If voters have specific questions about their party's primary nomination process, they should contact their party directly for more information. Although the party nomination process now takes place through the presidential primary, the major parties will still hold their caucuses. Precinct caucuses are meetings organized by Minnesota's political parties to begin the process of selecting candidates for the 2020 election and policy positions to shape the party platform. Caucuses are held in locations across Minnesota, are open to the public, and participation is encouraged. The 2020 precinct caucuses are scheduled for 1 week prior to the presidential primary election on Tuesday, February 25th at 7 p.m. While voting in a presidential primary is a change for our voters across Minnesota, rest assured that as election judges, the Election Day processes that you are familiar with remain largely the same. In addition to voting on Election Day, voters also have the option to cast an absentee ballot for the presidential primary beginning on January 17th. We will outline the key differences that you will need to be aware of on Election Day during this presentation. The polling place processes that have changed are to accommodate for voter privacy as voters choose which party's ballot to vote. It is important to keep in mind that while not everyone may agree with the structure of the new presidential primary, election judges and officials have an obligation to administer the election according to the law. Anoka County election judges have been exemplary in their professionalism and dedication that they have shown in past elections. We know that you will uphold that commitment to professionalism and adhere to the election judge oath taken at the beginning of the day. How will the presidential primary work? Each major political party determines whether they will participate in the presidential primary and which candidate names they choose to list on the ballot. 2 major parties in Minnesota will be participating in the 2020 presidential primary: the Republican Party and the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party. 2 additional parties attained major party status following the 2018 elections: the Legal Marijuana Now Party and the Grassroots Legalized Cannabis Party. However, both of those parties declined to participate in the presidential primary. One key difference with the presidential primary is that each party will have separate ballots with only the candidates for their party appearing on the ballot. In addition, every voter is required to designate which party's ballot they wish to receive, either the Republican Party or the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party. For the absentee voting process, this designation will be made on the absentee ballot application. For voters casting their ballot on Election Day, they will select their party during the check-in process on the poll books. We will outline in detail how this process will work later in the training. The voter oath that each voter must sign will include additional language for the presidential primary, reading, I am in general agreement with the principles of the party for whose candidates I intend to vote. If a voter refuses to select a party or sign the voter oath, they are not eligible to vote in the presidential primary. Instructional posters will be provided in your polling place that outline this requirement for any voters that have questions. Allow voters a reasonable amount of time to reread the informational posters and give voters the ability to change their mind and provide a major party ballot choice before asking them to leave the polling place. Head judges should assist with any voters who continue to refuse to provide a major party ballot choice. Let them know that they are not able to vote in the nomination primary election and that they will need to leave the polling place. List anything of importance from these types of conversations on the incident log. The legislation authorizing the presidential primary includes a provision that certain information be provided to each of the 4 major political party chairs. That information includes each voter's name, address, voting districts, year of birth, and their major party ballot choice. Parties that receive this information are only allowed to use it for political and election purposes, purposes currently allowed under current law. As in every election, who you vote for will remain secret. A privacy statement will be included in large print at the pollbook judge table stating the following. Before voting, election law requires that you select which major political party's ballot you want. If you refuse to select one party's ballot, you cannot vote. Your choice of major political party will not be public information except that it will be made available to election officials and to the chairs of each major political party after the primary. Voter privacy is a top priority with every election, but especially so with the presidential primary, where voters will be designating their party preference. Voters have voiced concerns about their data being shared, and we expect you will hear those concerns in the polling place on Election Day. We can address these concerns by being transparent about who will receive their information and by practicing discretion and confidentiality during the check-in and voting process. Election judges must keep in mind that a voter's political party choice is considered to be private data under state law and must be treated as such. This information cannot be communicated to anyone other than for the express purpose of ensuring the correct ballot is given to the voter. Election judges must never search for or review a voter's party designation other than for what is required to help check in voters and issue their correct ballots. Election officials and election judges must not share a voter's party choice with anyone else within or outside the polling place before, during, or after Election Day. Criminal and civil penalties may apply if there is a data breach of a person's major party ballot choice. You can anticipate that at the presidential primary you will receive more questions and concerns about the process than you might at a state primary or general election. We will provide a frequently asked questions handout in your polling place supplies that will help you to address many of the common questions that we anticipate you will receive from voters on Election Day. Answers to some questions may be outside of the scope of your role as election judge, including specifics about the awarding of delegates, the party's nomination process, and the party's decision to include or not include certain candidates on their ballots. In those cases, you can refer voters to contact their party if they would like additional information. If voters are frustrated or have ideas about the process and wish to express their thoughts and feelings, we will provide an Anoka County Elections voter feedback form for this purpose. This will give voters a chance to share their input on the primary without having to complete a complaint form. We can then use the return feedback forms to shape our own feedback to the legislature should they look to make changes for future presidential primary elections. If you are dealing with a voter who clearly isn't going to stop talking, let them talk. Often they just want to feel heard, and your body language and facial expressions can promote those positive feelings. Relaxing facial muscles, nodding, and moving slowly to stand alongside an upset person goes a long way to de-escalate feelings of anger. Use a calm voice and show empathy. Confirm that you heard and understood the voter correctly. Consider your own past experiences where you have calmed down a worried person or how you have de-escalated a situation with an angry voter in the past. Level with the voter by saying something like you, voter privacy and election security are our top priorities. This system was designed with you in mind, and if you can think of any improvements, I would be happy to give you the appropriate feedback form to fill out. Remember, if a voter is angry, it is not your fault and it is not your job to convince them not to be. You are simply doing your job by administering this election, and they may complain through the appropriate channels, such as talking to their legislator, if they wish. Privacy in the polling place is always a top concern. To accommodate for multiple ballot styles and the privacy of a voter's ballot choice, some polling place procedural adjustments will take place for the presidential primary. These process changes were made with voter privacy in mind, as well as ease of process for election judges. The poll book tables should be arranged so that a voter's major political party choice is not easily seen by anyone other than the election judges providing voter receipts. Make sure that the poll books are positioned in a way that when the voter is selecting their party, they are facing away from the queue of voters waiting to check in. Voter receipts should also be issued to a voter face down, and processed voter certificates should be placed face down in their storage containers. At the ballot judge table, there will be folders provided to store the ballots in a way that does not reveal which party's ballot the voter will receive. All ballots should be issued to voters inside of a secrecy cover to ensure their selection remains private. We will revisit these changes again in detail as we discuss each election judge position. You will also have detailed instructions on the election judge duty cards found in your precinct supplies. If you are ever confused about these changes on election day, the head judge will be the first line of support. Your city clerk and the county elections office can be contacted for additional support, especially if anything of a serious or emergency nature arises. The greeter judge is responsible for welcoming voters and guiding them through the first step in the voting process. As the first person who voters will interact with, the greeter judge should be prepared to outline the process for voters and also should expect to receive questions and concerns about some of the changes for the presidential primary. A frequently asked questions sheet will be provided so that you can address questions raised by voters when they first arrive at the polling place. In addition, you can refer voters to the posters that will be provided to help outline the process. Among the key pieces of information that you should be prepared to provide to voters, they are required to make a party selection in order to receive a ballot, their ballot will only have candidates for the party that they select, and information, including which party a voter selects, will be shared with the chairs of the 4 major political parties. We do ask that the greeter judge provide extra patience and understanding for voters with this new primary process. All election officials must keep decorum in the polling place and keep the safety of voters in mind. Always refer to your head judge if you feel a voter is becoming increasingly upset. That little bit of waiting period sometimes de-escalates a situation. As always, the greeter judge will be provided with a greeter's list of registered voters for their precinct, along with a paper precinct finder of the streets that are included in that precinct. If a voter's address is not found in the precinct finder, the voter can look up their address online at the Secretary of State's poll finder, or use the precinct finder on the poll books to determine their correct polling place. The process for checking in registered voters on the poll books is similar to previous elections, with a few notable changes. As before, the first step in the process is to search for the voter. Search using the first 3 letters of their first name and the first 3 letters of their last name. If they are not found, use an advanced search to look up a voter using their address or date of birth. You can also simplify your search by using less letters. For example, if the voter's name is Joe Smith, try typing SMI in the last name field and only the letter J in the first name field. Now you will catch multiple spelling possibilities like Joe, Joey, or Joseph. If a voter cannot be found, they must complete an election day registration. Once a voter is found, select their record and turn the poll book screen to face the voter. The voter then reviews their information and presses accept. On the next screen, the voter will be prompted to select their party choice. They will press the button for either the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party or the Republican Party, and then press accept. The voter will not be allowed to continue to the next screen until they have selected a party. Note that it should never be necessary for the election judge or the voter to state out loud which party a voter has selected. Election judges should always practice discretion, ensuring that party choices are not shared in ways that others may easily learn of another's choice. Be sure to avoid verbal confrontation with the voter about their party choice. If you or the voter has questions about the party selection, consider stepping aside and away from other voters. You can always refer voters to the posted sample ballots if they have questions about which party's ballot they wish to select. If the voter has more detailed questions about specific candidates, you should inform them that you cannot provide that information. You can direct them to contact the party if they would like additional information prior to checking in and voting. After the voter has selected their party, direct them to turn the screen back to the election judge. The judge completes a final review and presses Submit. 2 slips will then print: the voter's signature certificate and a voter receipt. This is different from the previous process. You will no longer use blue and white pads for voter receipts. The voter receipt will now print directly from the poll book printer. There will be a separate perforation between the voter signature certificate and the voter receipt. Once the slips have printed, you will direct the voter to review the oath and sign the voter's signature certificate. The voter's signature certificate is seen here on the screen below the letter A. As you'll note, the oath includes the additional language for the presidential primary. I am in agreement with the principles of the party for whose candidates I intend to vote. After the voter signs, the certificate should be placed face down into the storage container for registered voter signature certificates. The election judge will then initial the voter receipt and issue it to the voter. The voter receipt is seen on this screen under the letter B. The voter receipt will have the voter's party selection printed on the receipt, so it should be handed to the voter facing down to ensure that others cannot view the voter's selection. For voters that are not registered or have to change their name or address, they will need to follow the Election Day registration process. The election judge will key in the voter's name and then their address. As a reminder, when entering a voter's address, type only the house number and the first 3 letters or numbers of the street name. Then select the voter's address from the drop-down list. The remaining information will auto-populate. Be sure to also ask the voter whether they have an apartment unit number and record it if so. Remember, as with all other elections, voters must be 18 on or before Election Day in order to vote in the presidential primary. At the Proof of Residence screen, the election judge will verify the voter's proof of residence and follow the on-screen prompts to enter the required registration information. After entering all information, the voter registration application will print. Unlike in previous elections, the voter registration application will now print separately from the voter's signature certificate. The voter will sign the voter registration application after it prints. Next, the election judge turns the poll book to the voter to confirm that their information is correct. The voter reviews their information and presses Accept. On the next screen, the voter will be prompted to select their party choice. They will press the button for either the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party or the Republican Party and then press Accept. The voter will not be allowed to continue to the next screen until they have selected a party. After the voter has selected their party, direct them to turn the screen back to the election judge. The judge completes a final review and presses Submit. 2 additional slips will print: the voter signature certificate and a voter receipt. Once the slips have printed, you will direct the voter to review the oath and sign the voter signature certificate. This is seen here on the screen below the letter B. Place both the voter signature certificate and the voter registration application, seen here below the letter A, face down into the storage container for Election Day registrants. The election judge will then initial the voter receipt and issue it to the voter. The voter receipt is seen on this screen under the letter C. The voter receipt will have the voter's party selection printed on the receipt, so it should be handed to the voter facing down to ensure that others cannot view the voter's selection. If a voter makes an error during the check-in process or determines that they selected the wrong party, they are able to make a change so that they can receive the ballot for the party that they wish to vote for. In this scenario, do not cancel the voter check-in on the poll book and do not issue a new receipt. Instead, the head judge will have the voter complete the Party Preference Correction Form. This form can be found with the head judge materials. Due to the private nature of discussing party selection, this form should be completed in an area away from other voters. On the form, the voter will fill out their name, date of birth, address, and then sign. The head judge will complete the party change section of the form and will then escort the voter to the ballot judge to ensure that the correct ballot is issued to the voter. The Party Preference Correction Form must be returned along with the incident log to ensure that any necessary corrections can be made during post-election data entry. If you determine that the wrong voter was selected and checked in, the head judge will need to cancel that voter check-in. Find the voter's record in the poll book and follow the instructions to cancel the voter check-in. Then check in the correct voter and have them sign the voter's signature certificate. Print the word void on the incorrect voter signature certificate and paperclip it to the correct voter signature certificate. Make a notation in the incident log. There are a few other important things to note regarding the poll books for the presidential primary. Your poll books will now be sealed when you arrive at the polling place. Seal numbers will be noted on your precinct certification form. Review to confirm that the seal numbers match and then cut the seal to open the poll books. Another change that you will see is at the end of the day when you are completing your statistics reconciliation. When you review the summary report, the total number of voters, including both pre-registered and Election Day registrants, will appear under the check-in line. Election Day registrations are recorded separately. You will record both of these numbers on the precinct statistics worksheet and your summary statement tapes at the end of the day. To update the status of absentee voters on Election Day, Anoka County transmits data through a wireless hotspot. You will want to get your hotspot set up shortly after you arrive at the polling place. As a reminder, your poll pads do not require connection to the hotspot to check in and register voters. You should continue to use your poll pads even if your hotspot is not working. Contact your clerk if you cannot establish a connection to the hotspot. They will work with you to troubleshoot the issue or look into alternative measures to provide you with absentee updates. In your precinct supply bin, there is a bag of backup materials provided for you to check in and register voters in the event that your poll books become inoperable. The backup process is similar to the previous paper process that was used prior to 2018. All polling places will be provided with 2 copies of the greeters list. This list includes all of the registered voters for your precinct. To verify whether a voter is registered, consult the greeters list. If you verify that a voter is registered, they will then sign on the blank roster pages provided for you. You will need to have the voter complete their name, signature, address, voter ID number, which can be found on the greeters list, and date of birth. The blank roster pages will also have boxes for voters to indicate their party preference selection. If using the paper backup process, you must ensure that information for other voters, including their party ballot choice, remains concealed. Paper sheets can be used to cover the names of other voters on the page. Your backup materials will also include paper voter receipt pads. These will have a line for the election judge to note the political party selected by the voter. If a voter is not registered, they will need to show an acceptable identification document and complete a paper Election Day registration form. Once the form is completed and reviewed by the election judge, the voter will sign on the blank roster for Election Day registrants and mark their party selection. The election judge will then issue the voter receipt. The rest of the process will remain the same, with the voter taking the receipt to the ballot judge to exchange for a ballot. If the poll books are out for a short period of time, you might be contacted by your clerk to transfer the paper information back into the poll books after everything is restored. If you do run into an issue and believe that you may need to use the backup process, always contact your clerk to inform them of the problem before proceeding. After completing their check-in, voters proceed to the demonstration judge. The demonstration judge will discreetly collect voter receipts from voters. They should make note of the voter's party selection and then place the voter receipt face down on the table. The judge will then pull the ballot based on the voter's party selection. The ballot should be placed into a secrecy cover and can then be issued to the voter. The voter is not required to use the secrecy cover, but the ballot should always be issued inside of the secrecy cover to keep their party selection private. Demonstration judges should also explain to the voters the unique features of the presidential nomination primary ballot. These include: the ballot will be unique to the party chosen at the poll book station. The presidential nomination contest is the only race that will appear on the ballot. Write-in votes might be present on the ballot. The party chair chooses if a write-in option will be included on their ballot. One of the candidate choices might be uncommitted. The party chair chooses if an uncommitted option will be included on their ballot. If a voter has questions about what the word uncommitted means on their party's nomination primary ballot, you can read the following statement. If a voter chooses uncommitted on their major party's presidential nomination ballot, They are telling the party that they wish for the delegates to be sent to their national nominating convention without being bound to cast their votes for any one of their party's candidates. If you would like further information about your party's choosing of delegates and/or their national nominating convention, please speak with your party's representatives. This language will also be included on the demonstration judge duty card. If voters have any questions about why certain items are on their party's ballot or why some items are on one party's ballot and not another's, please refer them to their party's representatives. The demonstration judge also demonstrates how to mark the ballot using the AutoMark, the ADA ballot marking machine. Only one judge is needed to demonstrate how to use the machine. However, if a voter asks for assistance marking the ballot, then 2 election judges of different major political parties must be present. The demonstration judge is also responsible for managing the spoiled ballot envelope. We will talk more about spoiled ballots shortly. Seen here is a snapshot of the Republican Party ballot. The ballot includes one candidate name and a write-in option. The write-in option does not rotate. Party chairs are required to submit names of write-in candidates that they wish to be counted no later than 7 days before the primary. Seen here is a snapshot of the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party ballot. The ballot includes 15 candidate names and an uncommitted option. The uncommitted option does rotate with the other candidate names. The ballot judge counts and tracks packs of ballots, collects registered voter receipts, and issues ballots. The ballot judge for the presidential primary ensures that there is at least one pack of ballots for each of the participating major parties present. The ballot judge should pay careful attention to the ballot supplies of each major party, and if the supply seems low, they should notify the head judge and municipal clerk as soon as possible. The ballot judge will use the ballot tracking log to record the total number of ballots delivered to the polling place at the beginning of voting and the total number of ballots returned at the end of voting. You are not required to track supply totals by individual major party ballot. As judges open wrapped ballot packs, the individual ballots are counted. If a pack contains more or less than 50 ballots, it must be recorded on the form. After counting the ballots, 2 judges must write their initials on each ballot given to a voter. Be careful not to make any other marks on the ballot. Any 2 judges may perform this task. Judges from 2 different major parties are not required. For the presidential primary, you will be provided with an accordion folder to store the ballots. This will help to conceal the ballots in a way that should not make a voter's choice apparent, as the ballots are prepared to be issued to the voter inside of a secrecy cover. Throughout the day, the ballot judge tracks the number of voter receipts and records the number of ballots cast in your precinct. This is done using the voter receipt and ballot counter audit log. The number of voter receipts that have been issued and collected is recorded each hour. Note that you will not track separate receipts for registered voters and Election Day registrants, as all voters will now be issued the same style of voter receipt. The number of ballots counted by the machine is also recorded on the form each hour. You will find that number displayed on the ballot counter screen. Each precinct is required to submit balanced election returns. That means all ballots delivered to the precinct can be accounted for, and the number of voters matches the number of ballots cast. If your numbers are off, you should inform the head judge and determine what caused the discrepancy. As a reminder, because voter receipts contain the voter's major party ballot choice, they should be kept in a location on the ballot judge's table so that the information is not easily viewed by others. Voters sometimes make mistakes on their ballot. In that case, they are allowed to trade their spoiled ballot for a new one. The demonstration judge maintains the spoiled ballot envelope. A spoiled ballot is an original ballot returned by the voter and exchanged for a new ballot. The election judge should place the spoiled ballot in the spoiled ballot envelope and issue a new ballot to the voter. Spoiled ballots do not need to be recorded on the incident log. The one-to-one exchange of a spoiled ballot for the new ballot will not create any discrepancy with your statistics. Voters occasionally abandon their ballot, and it may be found by an election judge or another voter. If a ballot is found anywhere in the polling place besides the ballot counter, including in a voting booth or in the AutoMark, you should do the following. Record the location where the ballot was found at the top of the ballot. Place the found ballot in the spoiled ballot envelope, and make a note in the incident log. This is important as a found ballot will cause your statistics to be short by one ballot cast. At the end of the night, count all of the ballots in your spoiled ballot envelope, write the number on the envelope, and give it to your head judge. Note that if a voter spoils their ballot, they must exchange their ballot for one of the same political party. Take note of which party is on the voter's spoiled ballot before placing it into the spoiled ballot envelope, and select a new ballot of the same party to issue to the voter. Although we do not anticipate this happening with any frequency, it may be possible that a voter determines that the wrong party was selected after they received their ballot. In that case, they must complete the presidential nomination primary party preference correction form with the head judge in order to change their party designation. The voter should provide their first ballot to the demonstration judge to be spoiled, then fill out the party preference correction form. After signing, the voter can then receive the ballot for the other party. The ballot counter judge should be positioned so that the ballot counter screen is visible. Your job is to make sure a voter does not leave the precinct before their ballot has been counted. Make sure that you are also providing sufficient space for a voter to keep their party ballot choice private. If a voter is having trouble inserting their ballot or makes a mistake like voting for too many candidates, the screen will display an error message. Most voters will be able to read the message and respond to the screen prompts themselves. Some voters need additional assistance and may ask for your help. In this case, the election judge should be very clear in explaining the situation to the voter. Make sure the voter understands the message and how to resolve the issue before you take any action. Ballots can also become jammed. In that case, your ballot counter will clearly display a message letting you know whether the ballot has been counted or not. Instructions for clearing ballot jams are on the back of the ballot counter judge duty card. If your ballot counter stops working, inform your head judge immediately. Do not stop the voting process. Instead, open the auxiliary compartment located on the front of the ballot box. Voters can continue to vote and place their ballots in the auxiliary slot until the issue is resolved. After the close of polls, your head judge will make sure any ballots placed in the auxiliary compartment are counted. If your ballot box becomes full, inform your head judge. 2 judges of different political parties are allowed to empty the ballot box. The voted ballots must then be secured by the head judge, and a notation should be made in the incident log. At the end of the day, your head judge will lead the team through the closing of polls and completion of the precinct statistics worksheet. You will have detailed instructions on shutting down your equipment, as well as guidance on which items need to be returned on election night and what will remain in the polling place overnight. Please follow all provided instructions to ensure that all required documentation is completed and returned as directed. Keep in mind that after 8 p.m. and after all voters have finished the voting process, the polling place is open to any observers who wish to be present for the closing of the polls. The head judge serves as the manager and oversees precinct judge activities throughout the day. It is expected that the head judge will rotate election judge positions throughout the day to keep everyone fresh and to allow for skill development and interchangeability of judges. For the presidential primary, head judges can anticipate a greater emphasis on their role as diplomat or conflict resolution specialist in the polling place. All judges should be prepared to answer questions about the rules and laws governing the presidential primary election, but the head judge will play a key role in dealing with any voters that are especially upset or challenge the authority of other election judges. It is always useful to remind voters that election judges are carrying out their duties in alignment with Minnesota statutes and rules. Frustrated voters should be encouraged to complete a feedback form to express their thoughts and frustrations about the presidential primary without having to complete a complaint form. It is also important for us to take a step back and remember that the presidential primary election is new for everyone: voters, election judges, and election administrators. Practice extra patience among your teams and with voters as we navigate this election day together. Now that we have visited each of the judge positions, we will talk through some additional scenarios that you may encounter on election day. Some voters have trouble accessing the polling place. To accommodate these voters, polling places offer curbside voting. Information that outlines the process for curbside voting using the poll books can be found with the head judge materials. We will provide a brief overview of the curbside voting process. 2 judges of different major parties should take a poll book out to the vehicle to check in the voter. The judges should then return the poll book inside to print out the voter's signature certificate, voter registration application, if the voter is registering on election day, and the voter receipt. The judges will then take the voter receipt to the ballot judge to exchange for the party ballot that was marked by the voter. The judges then bring the printed voter certificate, the ballot placed inside of a ballot secrecy cover, a ballot marking pen, clipboard, and an I voted sticker. Have the voter sign the voter signature certificate and mark their ballot. After voting is completed, instruct the voter to place the ballot into the ballot secrecy cover. Ask the voter to remain at the polling place until the ballot is counted. Judges return to the polling place, hand the voter signature certificate to the poll book judge, and insert the voted ballot into the ballot counter. If the ballot counter returns a ballot, follow the procedure for ballot counter error messages. Inform the voter when their ballot has been accepted and read by the ballot counter. There is no campaigning allowed within 100 feet of the polling place building. If the polling place is on public property, no campaigning is allowed anywhere on the property. These are the same laws that govern Minnesota primary and general elections. For voters wearing campaign apparel or buttons, there are limited restrictions on what cannot be worn. If the item is for a candidate or party that appears on the ballot, then it is prohibited. But if the item is not for a candidate or party that is on the ballot that day, it is allowed. The head judge should ask voters to cover up or remove any prohibited material. If they refuse, the judge must still allow the voter to cast their ballot. Record the voter's name and details on the incident log to refer to the appropriate authorities. Voters and judges should also not discuss candidates or issues while at the polling place. Additional posters will be provided in your poster pack supply bag. These posters will provide additional instructions for voters on casting their ballot in the presidential primary election. All posters that are included in your supply bag should be posted on the walls in the polling place. You can always refer voters to these posters to gather more information before they check in to vote. Multiple copies of sample ballots for both parties will also be provided in your poster supplies. It may be difficult for some voters to select their party preference on the poll book screen. Be sure to offer other ways for them to indicate their party choice. These could include pointing at sample ballots, stepping away from other voters so that they can tell you in private, having assistance from a voter assistant to select, indicate, or write their party choice. When assisting a voter with navigating the polling place or in determining which party they wish to vote for, never assume how much help a voter needs. Always follow the voter's lead. Because this is a March election, we must also anticipate winter weather creating hazards affecting the accessibility of the polling place. Contact your city clerk if the sidewalks and parking lots become difficult to navigate. There is no change to the challenger process for the presidential primary. Major political parties and/or nonpartisan candidates can appoint one challenger per precinct who may remain in the polling place for the day. Challengers are not poll watchers. The only action a challenger may take is to contest a voter's eligibility if and only if they have personal knowledge of that voter's ineligibility. If this happens, a judge will follow the procedure outlined in the challenger packet provided in the head judge materials. Challengers cannot speak to voters or examine election day materials. They may not challenge a voter's party choice and cannot document who is voting for which party. If a voter is not satisfied with sharing their feedback using the Anoka County Elections feedback forms, they can file a state election law complaint form for any alleged violations of Minnesota election law. There is also a Help America Vote Act complaint form if a voter believes there is a violation of the Help America Vote Act of 2002, such as voting machine standards, posting of voting information, or voter registration. Both of these complaint forms are provided in the head judge materials. Following the presidential primary, there will be 2 more statewide elections this year at their regularly scheduled times. The state primary election will take place on the second Tuesday in August, August 11th. This election will include primary contests for partisan offices at the state and federal level. The state primary will follow the same format, with all parties appearing on the same ballot. Voters will not need to declare their party preference in order to receive a ballot for the state primary election. Then the 2020 general election will take place on Tuesday, November 3rd. This will include the presidential election as well as other federal, state, and local contests. We hope that many of you are interested in returning to work as an election judge for the state primary and the general elections. If you would like to work as an election judge for either or both of these elections, please contact your major political party so that you can be added to the party list for your precinct. These party lists are the primary source for your city clerks in hiring election judges and are the best way to ensure that you can secure your assignment for additional elections in 2020. Finally, we have provided here links to additional resources and contact information as you prepare for the presidential primary. The 2018 Minnesota Election Judge Guide and the 2020 Presidential Primary Election Judge Supplemental Guide will be provided in your polling place supplies. You are also encouraged to review these guides prior to Election Day. Updated forms that will be used on Election Day will be posted on the Anoka County Elections site as soon as they are finalized. You are also encouraged to contact Anoka County Elections or your city clerk with any questions that you have as you prepare for your election judge service. Also, don't forget to vote absentee if you are working outside of your voting precinct. You can apply online at mnvotes.org to request to have an absentee ballot sent to you by mail, or you can vote early in person at your city hall or at the Anoka County Elections office. Thank you again for serving as an election judge, and best of luck on Election Day.